Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Richard Saunders. I'm the director of the museum and professor of art history at Middlebury, and I have the great pleasure to welcome you to this afternoon's event and to introduce our guest speaker, photographer Jim Blair. But before I do that, I thought I should give you a couple words of caution, and that is there are a lot of people here, and for those of you who've already been in the museum and seen the gallery in which Jim's photographs are displayed, it's pretty small space. And so just if you look around, all of you are not going to fit into that space. If Jim says, follow me and come in to the gallery, which I think he's going to do. So please wander through the museum and be mindful that if the gallery gets too crowded, our staff will have to say it's really too crowded, and it won't be an enjoyable experience if everybody tries to squeeze in there. So the other thing I wanted to mention is that Jim has very graciously offered to give talks each Friday at 1 o'clock over the course of the summer, and this exhibit will be on view until Sunday, August 11th. So there's another opportunity to meet with him and to hear in greater detail some of the narratives about how many of these photographs came about. So I strongly encourage you to do that. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce this afternoon's speaker, Jim Blair. Although we actually met years ago at the Sparkses for dinner. I don't know whether you recall that. Yeah, we did. But I only really got to know Jim back a few years ago when I was working on an exhibition about the photographer Paul Strand in Vermont. And I was reintroduced to Jim by that gentleman taking the photograph right there, Jonathan Blake, who works for the museum. And we all shared this mutual interest in photography. I'm going to leave it to Jim to single out those aspects of his long and distinguished career that he'd like to share with you and share with us in conjunction with the exhibition being there, the photographs of James P. Blair. What I would like to do is to say something that most everyone here today already knows, and that is that if you get to know him as a friend, it becomes much easier to grasp why he's such a consummate photographer. What I mean is that there are fundamental aspects of his character that are really inseparable from his work. For example, Jim's attention to detail is supreme. He's always planning and thinking a number of steps ahead, just exactly as a photographer has to do in considering such elements as light, composition, vantage point, and timing to take a great picture. And I don't need to remind you, but I will, that his charm and personality are infectious. So it's not hard to understand why people all over the world for so many years greeted him as a friend, shared with him some of their innermost thoughts, and allowed themselves to be photographed. And lastly, his focus on fine detail is balanced by a great awareness for the larger picture. Just as in our personal lives, putting things in context is important, Jim seems to have always been aware of just how images, one after the next, have helped us to grasp much larger issues such as apartheid, land conservation, and climate change, to name but three. So, Jim, all of us are here to say thank you for being our guide for so many years and being such an exemplary model for all of us. We're all in your debt. So please welcome Jim Blair.
Bingo, bingo, hello, hello. Can you all hear me? Okay. This is my granddaughter, Elizabeth McMillan. Wave to everybody. There you are. You can put that down, okay. And Elizabeth, if you want to sit down, you can sit over here. But stay right here because I need you on my right hand. You got to do this on the other side. No. Let's put this. I think I have it written down here somewhere. It says, thank you, Richard, for your kind introduction. Well, that was not a kind introduction. That's just sort of out and beyond the whole possibility of introductions, right? Thank you for everything. It's so wonderful. And to everyone who's here, who works at the museum, Mickey is here, standing there. Thank you, Mickey, very much for everything that you've done to make this come about. I wrote this down. I think it's true. I said to myself, when you go up there on Wednesday afternoon, you're gonna look around and say, am I woken up from some kind of dream, or the dream is still going on? Well, that's what I wrote down. Have you ever woken up, looked around, and asked yourself, how did I get here? Well, I've been asking myself that question right now, and I have been really asking that question right now, and I think I have the answer, and I will tell it to you. I am here largely for the first instance, although we did meet at the Sparks's, and everybody who's been around Middlebury knows how wonderful Kim and Sue Sparks are. He's certainly in all of our memories. And the dinner parties that were given by the Sparkses in their farmhouse out in Cornwall were just superb. They really were wonderful. And afterwards, a cigar would be offered with a very good glass of cognac, if I remember rightly. It was quite a remarkable couple, and it was wonderful to be their friends and to be invited to dinner on many occasions. But the first time this kind of thing started because of the Paul Strand exhibit, I think, and that started because I was working on a project with an 8x10 view camera, a Deerdorf 8x10 view camera, anybody who's a photographer in town, and I will talk about that in a minute. Jonathan came by to the studio we have in the back where the garage is, and saw the 8x10 view camera and says, hey, that's a great idea. You know, we're starting to plan an exhibit on Paul Strand. And would you be willing to lend your view camera? And I said, of course I would be delighted to lend my view camera to any story about Paul Strand, who's one of the great early 20th century photographers. That's how we got really more acquainted professionally. I got acquainted with Richard, and he invited me over. We looked at those Strand photographs before they went in their mats, when they were the pictures were just lying on your desk table, very carefully lying on the desk table because they were very valuable. About Strand working in Vermont. And then Emmy and I met, and she, Emmy Donadio, who's here, I'm deeply grateful to her as well for her kind introduction to me and to the Friends of the Middlebury Art Museum. And we, well, thank you. We,
Take a sip.
I will, thank you. This is my wife, Elise. Elise, stand up, Elise. No, I want you to please stand up. You're terrific, honey. In every way. It's just, and nothing could be more wonderful. Well, thank you. So one thing led to another, and the next thing I knew, I was standing over here in room 125, something like that, and talking to an overflow crowd of people about the environment with a story that the slideshow that I have called "The Past is Prologue," about the history of the environmental movement, which I covered for the Geographic pretty thoroughly, and so I'm deeply grateful because Richard came in and there was no room in the inn for him to sit down. So that didn't bother him at all. He came in and sat on the floor, watched the show, and then after the show invited me to have lunch, and we went to the newly opened Coriander, I think, and at that lunch he said, "Hello, Susan, how are you?" It's one of the great photographers in the world is sitting behind the bush over here. But that's oftentimes where we photographers are, behind us, so that's okay. It's perfectly all right. It's nice to see you. This is really great. If you see Susan's cards in the bookstore, those are Susan's. But meet Susan afterwards. I will introduce her. She is great. Richard at that point said, during lunch, he said, "We'd like to have you have a show at gallery." I said, "Of course, sure, why not?" And so that's what we're going to look at this afternoon. And I think that I'm really now no longer sure that I'm awake. I think I'm still dreaming because this is really stunning. Let me go on. The people who you work with, sometimes they pass in the night, and you don't see much of them. We photographers worked together for 35 years in my case at the Geographic, and but if you could count up another number of times that I ran into Bruce in Paris or London or Timbuktu or somewhere, it was zero. But we would always get together in the Christmas time, the staff photographers, and there were 20 of us on the staff of the National Geographic. And we would have a party, and then we would have a photographers meeting with our boss, Robert E. Gilka, who will forever be remembered as Mr. Gilka, because that was how you addressed a man of great character, and he was a terrific boss. But the most remarkable thing is it's been 25 years since we all worked together. 1994 we retired. Bruce and I retired, and the magazine is still going on. New wonderful photographers are working there, and yet here we are. Bruce and Vicki came all the way from Washington just to be here this afternoon. And I am so deeply touched. Thank you, Vicki. Thank you very much. It's so sweet. Bruce, thank you. Thank you. But they didn't come by themselves. Bruce put the word out, and the next thing I know, I get a call from Nathan Ben. And Nathan Ben is here too. Nathan, where are you? Nathan. Where, Nathan? Hey, there you are. In the blue shirt. Did Greg make it? Hello, Greg. Hello, Greg. Greg came all the way, and you brought your children, who got much bigger. Oh my God, look at you both. That's terrific. That's terrific. Nice to see you. Thank you, Greg, for coming. That's so. I'm overwhelmed.
Emily. Emily.
And Emery has come.
Yes.
Oh no, where is Emery now? You have to know. I mean, it's one thing to be a photographer, but there's one special guy who was a photographer at the Geographic, and his name is Emery Christoph. And Emery Emery did something really special. Yeah, he's back over here in the corner. And it's a simple thing, but Emery found a boat. He looked for a boat for a long time and he found it. You know what the name of the boat is? It's the Titanic. I'm not joking. He found the Titanic. This guy.
Where is he, Jim?
He's over here. Here. So, I mean, it's just remarkable. Thank you, Emery, for coming up. They live in southern Vermont now, and I'm very happy you came. But I haven't finished. Wait a minute. Hold on. I've got. Who else was there? Lots of people. And the other side of it, so that's pretty much for the staffers. But can you, I mean, who would go even, 200 miles to go visit an old colleague from 25 years ago? I mean, we go to our college reunions, but I mean, this is really special. Bruce, you're really terrific to come, and Nathan, for you to come. I'm just blown away. It's just wonderful. So, the exhibit has happened, right? And the way it's happened was to have Richard say, let's do it, and then Ken Pullman do it. Where's Ken? Ken is here, I hope. There's Ken in the green shirt back here. Ken put it together. He made it happen. This is my chance to say that we photographers are pretty full of ourselves. We think of we'd like to see our pictures in the magazine. We like to see them big, and we like to see them well printed and everything else. And this is my opportunity to say my thanks to not only to Ken, who put what's up on the walls here, but the people who put my pictures in the white space that's called the National Geographic for 35 years. So we have a luncheon group back in Washington that meets once a month. It's about 100 people that circulate around. Oops, and they come and go, and I just spilled the water. It's not very much water, so not to worry. At any rate, you forgive me for being a little slow on this, but it's just there were editors, layout people, printers, all the rest of them who made it possible for the. Let's just get this. That'll dry it. Making you
Sure. You're good. You keep going.
All right. I'll keep going. All right. I want to thank those people as well. And it's just the space, Ken, that you made into my exhibit is just very nice. Thank you. Thank you very much. And lastly, I'd like to thank Elise for being Elise and being, she stood up already, but thank you, Elise.
The whole family.
And the whole family has come. Now I want to talk about my family. David has come all the way from San Francisco with Jackson. Yeah, this is David. Where's Jackson here too? Hey, you, Jackson.
Yes, more beautiful hair.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, Jackson, thank you for coming, man.
All the way up.
That's so terrific. Thank you. David and Jackson had come, and from down in Maryland, this young lady, this is Elizabeth McMillan, and her father.
Who is up there?
Who was out here, upstairs. There he is, up there. Came, and they flew up, and excuse me. And Scott and Saskia and Amelie and Oliver. Where is Oliver? Is Oliver here?
Napping in
He's
the,
napping.
in the museum.
Hello, Peter. Hello, how are you? Thank you for coming. So everybody is standing around, and I think I've said all the thank yous that I need to say, and I hope that I want to say. but I would thank you for coming as well. And it's just I just keep saying over and over again, thank you very much. But let me tell you a bit about the exhibit. I don't know, how long did you want me to speak for? Well, now I've spoken already for quite some time. So I won't speak for very long. But being there comes from the following old story that the Associated Press had. That when one of the photographers was asked, how do you guys get those great pictures? He answered as a crusty old photographer, and he growled back. He said, "It's 8F, it's F8, it's F8, and you got to be there, buddy. You guys got to be there." And I took that as the title for this show. So let me turn now to the exhibit. So there are a lot of pictures in the file at the Geographic from all of us. Some of them published, some of them not published, some of them published a number of times. And I had 46 stories published by the Geographic. They sort of build up, have one after the other. And some 2,000 pictures in the various publications at the Geographic. So I think as a staff photographer, and all of us, we paid for our paycheck, paid back the paycheck. And the pictures are still being used all over the world, and I'm very happy about that. And so the character of these pictures that you'll look at this evening, and I think I will stop rather than get into the individual photographs, is that the small gallery in Overbrook is of my beginnings in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, working with Roy Stryker, who was famous for having led the photographers at the Farm Security Administration during the Depression. And he came to Pittsburgh to set up something called the Pittsburgh Photographic Library to document what was going on and the changes in the redevelopment of Pittsburgh in the 1950s. And I fortunately got brought onto the group of photographers and given an opportunity to photograph, even though I was very young. And that, in turn, you'll see those pictures, 2 or 3 of them. And then my pictures from the Institute of Design, where I went to school, which was part of the Illinois Institute of Technology in Chicago. I was a student of Harry Callahan and Aaron Siskin. And if you're interested in photography and art photography of the middle 20th century, these 2 men were really remarkable and wonderful photographers, great teachers, and very, very helpful to me. And then you go into the larger gallery, and there's a slideshow that runs continuously that is interesting to see, I think, and talks about my career at the Geographic. And then you go into the larger gallery, and it's all the National Geographic pictures. And Richard had a good idea. He said, why don't we take a sampling of your stories that you did and put up the pictures that ran and then maybe a couple that didn't run for each story. And we did exactly that. So you'll see a copy of the magazine below each set of pictures that has the photographs. You start with Tristan da Cunha, you right into the gallery and then go around clockwise, and you end with pictures from the Russian voyage trip that I made down the Volga River in 1992. And I think you'll find it an interesting progression. Did you find it interesting? I think, I hope so. I'm a documentary photographer, and that what that means is that without artifice and without control, without interference, I hope that when I'm shooting a picture, the picture comes together and makes a statement that shows, in general way, I try to get down to it, the problems that the people face that I'm assigned to photograph, and that's the effort that I make when I go out. Somebody was very kind and said nice things about my pictures of people, particularly of the gold miner, and it's a matter of simply being there, but really paying attention, and really being alive to the human being that's on the other side of the camera. And I think with that, I'll suggest it's now 5:30. We close at 6:30, so we have an hour to look at the photographs. And I think those who haven't seen them, you need to come and look at the pictures, because I'm not going to not let you see the photographs. So let's go look at the photographs. Yes, ma'am. Wait.
Two things. Why did you ask people to take turns so that everybody can have a turn? Because Richard said that too many people to come all at once.
Right. So, yeah, maybe.
And one more thing.
Yeah.
You were going to mention Pat.
Which one?
You were going to mention Pat.
I should mention Pat.
You
I want
didn't. You were going to. It was in the text.
Yes, it was in the text, and she typed it up. I'm very happy and lucky to say I've had three great, wonderful women in my life. Obviously, my mother, and then secondly, and there's another one too. You're red. But my mother was wonderful, and I think I owe my disposition to my lovely mother and father. And then I had the great good fortune to marry Patricia Wogamuth, who I met in Ethiopia, of all places. And she, I think the word is stood by me. I think that's the expression we use, isn't it, Bob? That, your wife stands by you in the times of stress and success as well. And she really was wonderful, and then surprisingly and wonderfully, I met Elise, and we've been married for the last 18 years. So it makes she not only makes, I think the expression is, she makes my day. She makes every hour, every minute, every second of my day. Is that enough? And there are people up here that Faith Terry is wonderful. A person that I met who, early on in our trips to Vermont, I found out that she knew all about the Bauhaus, and we've had great friendship since 1992 or something, 3. And all of you are great friends and dearly beloved people, and I want you to see my pictures. So I'm going to stop. Thank you very much. Description of my early life, and I was just a kid with a camera. And when I started photography, it started when I was 12, thereabouts. I don't really know exactly, and I don't remember, but sometimes before, when I was really little. And then one of the great things that I got for Christmas present one time was an Argus C3, which was we used to, when we got older, we called it the brick. that looked like a brick, weighed about the same as a brick, and it was made somewhere in the United States. I don't remember, in New York, I think. And shot my first couple of pictures on color film with it. And my parents and I went out, took a tour of the West in, I don't know, 1947 or something. There were no super highways, and it was a really interesting experience. In our Oldsmobile, I remember we had an Oldsmobile. So my photography started pretty early. I shot pictures for the high school yearbook, and before I knew it, I was at the Institute of Design in Chicago and at home in Pittsburgh in the summertime. And I photographed my hometown, which are these three pictures here, and these are three representative pictures. And the one that's most important is the one of the woman sitting on the curb with the bottle of liquor that's factory finished. Because I'd done what every other photographer does. I was walking in the north side of Pittsburgh and a camera around my neck. Mickey, I actually got here beforehand. Hey!
Glad to see you.
Yeah. And we saw David play tennis, and I had lunch, which is all things are in the car. So anyway, that's fine. I'm walking along with this cameraman around my neck, and there's this lady in there, and she's clearly really drunk. And I thought, well, that's an interesting picture, you know. And I'm not yet 20, I think. And I go click, and then I go away. Film is expensive, and I thought I got the picture, so I walked away. I got down to the end of the block, and I said, no, that's not right, it's not right. I said in my head, I said, there's some mechanism started revolving around. It was really interesting. And I said, no, I should photograph her. And I tore out the roll of film, wound it back on the cassette, tore it out, put a new roll of film in, and came back and introduced myself, and then sat down and spent the next hour with her, or however long it was. I have no idea how long it was, but it was a long time. Come and find a chair and sit down, please. I went, okay, would you like a chair? We have lots of chairs. There's a chair right here in the middle. Come sit in the middle. Come, don't be shy. Don't be shy. No, please, come. There's two chairs. There's another chair right here. Who wants to sit in this chair? I'll sit in that chair. Nobody else. Anyway, you shoot pictures wherever you can, right? This is on the Omo River in Ethiopia. That's where we landed. Was that picture? And she's just doing like every mother does. She's cooking dinner, and the kids are doing what all kids do. They gather around, waiting for dinner. Annie, pretty, you come and sit down, Annie. Come in here, Annie. This is Annie. Hi, greetings.
Sorry, Dick.
How are you?
Good.
I'm glad you're here.
Did you think it was important to ask her permission to?
And that's what I did. I asked her, I
Oh,
sat
okay.
down, introduced myself. I said, can I take your picture? And she said yes. And she was at the end of her rope and at the end of her bottle. And I didn't know from nothing. I mean, I was like 20 years old, and she unloaded on me, and I have the pictures to prove it because I shot a whole roll of film. And in the book I have that you'll see, there's my book, which is called Being There, is over on the coffee table in the center. And it's a contact sheet with all those pictures. And then I took that contact sheet and the film into my boss, who happened to be Roy Stryker. Roy Stryker happened to be a famous fellow, and he was had been the director of the Farm Security Administration's historical section during the Depression. And it's thanks to him that we can see what life was like in the hardscrabble farms of Vermont and in the blowing away Midwest of the 1930s. He's considered in photography to be really a great man. And it was my good fortune to have him literally as a boss. I worked for the Pittsburgh Photographic Library for 3 summers while I was at school at the Institute of Design, which is part of the Illinois Institute of Technology. And he picked out that picture, said this one's the best one. And I don't know what you think. What does anybody think? Can you see the picture? Is it true?
Oh, absolutely.
Is it clear? Is it honest? Is it representative? Is it what? Is it sympathetic, I hope? One thing I learned very quickly was that you don't photograph from up above, ever. I wouldn't, if I were photographing you, I mean, because it's a group, I would photograph you from about here. Here, like this, quick. So I would get out my camera and do it. Because I'm a photographer. Well, and what I'm doing, I like the panorama thing. Panorama is so great. You all know about the panorama on this camera? We can talk about this camera. This is one of the great cameras. I got James there. And it says right here, don't go too fast. But I find it amazing. Everybody smile.
Right.
All right. Now coming up on you. Bingo.
That's a wide.
Now. That makes for a really wide angle picture, right? It's great. So there we have it. You can vaguely see it. I'll pass it around you. Oh, good. Not only is Kirsten here, but my wife is here. Just come in a black sweater.
Wife,
That's great. Annie's here.
listen on the floor.
No. Here, you sit there. You can sit here. I'll sit next to you. Good. By the way, you know you can control this thing. Does everybody have an iPhone or something like an iPhone? Yeah. Well, there is a little sign up here that says Edit. You punch that button, and this is going to be kind of rambling a little bit, and you can crop it. You see the little crop marks even from there?
Oh, yeah.
So you can come in and crop it. So I'll bring this in a little bit, and I'll leave that there. And then you can also go here with the light. When you hit the top one is for light, and you have to make it dark or light with the slider. It always wants to seem to want to go to light. And then you say done. And it saves the picture. So now it's a little lighter, you can see. But it's great, I'll pass it around. And then on the computer I can make this even lighter still. But here, have a look and pass it around. This is the Carrizo Plain. This is the San Andreas Fault, everybody. You see it? That crack in the Earth's surface. You know, it goes out of North Los Angeles. This is right after an earthquake. That's my picture. And it goes right through my it goes slightly, no, it goes right through David's house, which is north of San Francisco. But I'm a documentary photographer, as it turns out. You might be a guest. I take pictures of things that are going on, life that's going on. I follow little scraps of paper that come from a guy by the name of R.E.G. Robert E. Gilka that say JPB, do the San Andreas Fault, do Iran. The picture editor is so-and-so. That's what you'll see in all these things. The picture editor is so-and-so. And there's a description of it over here on the other wall. Please prepare to leave for assignment in 2 weeks' time, which means I had 2 weeks to research. And that was the other great man that we had, and is recognized in the profession, Robert E. Gilka, who was the director of photography for 30 years at the National Geographic Society. We had the photographer with whom I worked 25 years ago came in for the opening for the show on Wednesday. 3 of them. Can you believe that?
I just got a picture of 3 of them.
There's the 3 of them. Yeah, these are the 3 of them. It's just really, really wonderful that everybody has come. And I would go to theirs too. So anyway, yeah, there 4 out of the 20 photographers that were on the staff. Where was I? Anyway, I'm still standing here taking this picture. I take the picture, I bring it home, I develop it, I make a contact sheet, I go into Roy Stryker of the Farm Security Administration, and he says, shoot this one, or print this one. So I go into the dark room in the lab in the Pittsburgh Photographic Library, which happened to be in the University of Pittsburgh, which happened to be where my father taught economics. And so I'm a really, that's another story, but it's a really lucky story, wonderful story. And so that picture starts me off, I think, my view is, starts me off with an understanding that that's the way you have to take pictures of people. You have to become engaged. And you have to be empathetic. And you don't get good pictures. So I went back in the fall for my senior year to the Institute of Design in Chicago, and Aaron Siskin, who is a wonderful photographer, gave me this assignment, which is these 2 pictures here, to photograph the Armister Henton family in a rundown tenement in Chicago. There was a little bit of heat coming out of the radiator, and it was cold water, and Mrs. Henton dried the laundry from the family's wash in the empty back room in her house, in the house, and I discovered something else. I discovered how lonely it is to be poor and how lonely it is to be black. And so it's been a continual learning experience all my life. And before I graduated, I was in the Naval Reserve Officers Training Program, so I found myself suddenly an ensign in the United States Navy, and with the Military Sea Transport Service, we hauled troops across to Korea. I made 19 trips back and forth across the Pacific in the course of 2 years, and 1 long trip down to a place called French Indochina. And in French Indochina, there were an agreement that had developed between the U.S. and the rest of the world with John Foster Dulles, that war for independence that the Vietnamese were fighting and had won against the French would result in a division of one country into two. So Vietnam would become North Vietnam and South Vietnam on the 18th of May, and they would divide the country at the 17th parallel. We went up into the North Vietnam. I don't know, has anybody been to Vietnam? You have? Have you been up here in the Bai Da Lan?
I've been
In the north,
what you mean,
northeast of Hong Kong?
Which is,
Everybody goes there, I understand. Can you see it?
I didn't go to the bay, no.
No, okay, well anyway, there's a wonderful, beautiful bay of karst mountains, limestone mountains, rocks, and they're all carved out in their caves. And this is a great place for pirates to hide from the south, from the Yellow Sea, from the South China Sea. And we were there, this is 1955, January 1955, and we're taking these refugees on board our ship. And obviously for a story, there's a whole bunch of other pictures, right? But these are the three that I think tell the tale the best. And they were young and old, and mother with baby, and cross, a Christian cross. They were members of the Christian Church, Catholic Church, and the communists had come in and were killing priests and local churches, and as a result driving these people out of North Vietnam aboard our ship to South Vietnam, which didn't turn out to be a very good place to go either. But I was there before we had the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War starts in the 1960s, and I was there essentially 5 years beforehand. But this little girl, I'm sure is still alive, if she's alive, and I just wonder whatever became of her. She certainly was not sure about what her future was going to be when I took that picture. It's interesting, the square pictures are Rolleiflexes, and the rectangular ones, of course, are Leicas. And I got out of the Navy in 1956. Before I knew it, the Hungarians had risen up in protest against their Russian occupiers and throwing rocks at tanks. Tanks is not something that you do for very long. I heard the news on the radio. I didn't like it because I'd been on a refugee mission before. I thought that was a really nasty thing for people to do. So I determined I wanted to go to the Hungarian border and photograph whatever I could photograph. And I got the U.S. Information Agency to give me a free ride over on the MATS flight, and made my way on Christmas night to the Eisner Canal, which is right on the Hungarian border. In order to be there, you got to use a lot of foot power. You got to, and a lot of finger power. You got to dial the telephone, but I dialed Life magazine several times and they didn't bite, and I dialed the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette and I dialed several times and they didn't bite. And finally, I got a call, spoke to a man at the U.S. Information Agency, said, Blair, you're the kid who made the pictures in Vietnam that we used, aren't you? And I said, yes, sir, I am. He said, they were good. Come on down. So I got in my car, drove down to Washington. Really lousy weather. Drove down to Washington, saw them, got a letter that said, this guy represents us. And it was all much more casual in those days. And came back, and I was promised $10 a picture for 40 pictures, if I remember. So I thought, Okay, that's all right. Whatever it costs. And a free flight over and transport. Anyway, one thing led to another. I found myself on this border right there on Christmas Eve, and I made no pictures because it would have been flash, and flash would have given us away. And so I didn't make any pictures until dawn, and then I made one. And the camera had gotten so cold that the shutter stuttered, and that's the black line that goes along the side of the picture now. But I made a picture there. I made pictures of the refugees. They came into the refugee center in Andau, and as they then waited to go aboard USNS Marine Carp up here on their way to the United States. And this tag that he's got there is the International Committee on European Migration. As you remember, after the Second World War, there were millions of people that were displaced all over. I mean, there were Romanians in Spain, Spanish in Romania, and whatever. But there had to be this great exchange of people back and forth as peace came over Europe. And this was not part of this was long after, but the committee was still in organized, and it was a very useful thing. And finally, we passed the Statue of Liberty coming into New York Harbor, and these are the people who came, the refugees, and they were singing first the Hungarian national anthem, the old one, and then they started to sing God Bless America, and I was very moved, and I took that picture. I think it's sharp, but behind the viewfinder was all wet because I was crying. That's not a bad thing to do when you're confronted with a situation that is as moving as this was. Let's move into the other thing. I came back, found myself with a job at the National Geographic. You have to move. People send me notes of appreciation, which is nice, which I've kept every one of them. Yes, ma'am.
Quick question about the first picture you took, the woman that had been raped.
Yeah.
At what point, that particular picture, how long had you been talking to her? Or, you know,
I mean, about an hour, probably. I mean, it seemed to me a long time when I thought about it.
Yeah.
But it was the determination to go back and get engaged, not just go steal pictures. And so from then on, I said, I ain't going to do that no more. And so all these pictures are all, unless the situation was evaporating. There's sometimes when there's only a moment that you have to take a picture, and if you're lucky you get it, and you're not so lucky you don't get it. So let me carry on about the geographic. So this is it. I've got this gadget with me because I need to have more oxygen than I otherwise produce. So I joined the National Geographic staff in July of 1962 and retired from the Geographic in April of 1994. And that was just one of the greatest things that could happen to anybody. I mean, Grace, we had a couple of people who couldn't quite take it, or their families couldn't take them being away, but I had a wonderful wife and family, and I hope David shows up. Is David here yet?
No, he's still playing tennis.
He's still playing tennis, but well, he can play tennis, he knows all about this. Anyway, The life is, I've written a thing up here that explains it more thoroughly perhaps, but let me give you a kind of an appreciation. So I would get this memo from the director of photography saying, go do this and don't come back until you get the pictures. And it really meant, I mean, it really, we would send in the photographs, and send in the film. Obviously it wouldn't be developed because it was Kodachrome, and it was the only place to develop it was, in those days, was either Paris or London or New York, Washington, and Los Angeles, and not on Tristan da Cunha. That was one of my first assignments in 61, 62, which is, anybody know where Tristan da Cunha is? These days, cruise ships stop there, which is really pretty remarkable. If the weather's calm, which it usually isn't, and I suppose they go ashore even. It was an island in the mid-South Atlantic, south of Helena, where St. Helena, where Napoleon was kept, and sort of across from Cape Town, South Africa, and across from Buenos Aires, but Santos, Brazil, the southern port. At any rate, so you can imagine, right in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And these people had washed, people had over 3 or 4 generations had washed ashore essentially. They were either whalemen that had decided they didn't like whaling, and they'd stayed on the island, when they went into provision, and eventually the population got up to, I don't know, 1,000 maybe at the most. And then there was in 1960, I think, there was a volcano that popped up and actually broke the surface and caused the British government, who owns the island, to take the people off and bring them to London, where they were great curiosities because they'd never been outside of this little island in the mid-Atlantic Ocean. They had no concept of automobiles or railroad cars or trams or anything like that, and so they were made much of, and they were made too much of, and they decided when the volcano subsided that they wanted to go home. Everybody wants to go home. Well, even if you live on the middle of an island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, you don't, you think of it as home, and everybody wants to go home. So the British Home Office said, okay, you can go back, and they chartered a ship, and in the bottom picture, there is the big, obviously the transport ship. There are 2 cargo ships on either side, but we came off that ship in the boats that the islanders had built, and they thought this was really special, and they wrote, the guys wore their ties even coming ashore, which is quite wonderful. If you look closely at the photograph, and photographs are very interesting because it's interesting to look closely at what's going on inside the photograph. You know, it's not enough just to glance at it. You have to literally, if you want to appreciate a photograph, not necessarily mine, but other people's photographs. Look at your own pictures. Look at what's going on inside the photograph. The way you get the best appreciation. And so, where am I supposed to be? I'm not sitting in the back of the boat. You know, I'm not sitting I'm not staying on board ship. You know, I'm in the front of the boat where I can make a photograph. And that's the lead photograph for the story. And if you pick up that magazine down below and give it to me, hand me the photograph, please, of the magazine, and open it up to that little green dial there, dot.
Do it.
There you go.
Look at that.
There you go, everybody. Now, this is what you call lead photograph, right? Kirsten, would you agree? Where's Kirsten?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a lead photograph. You know why? Because it says everything. Everything that you would make you interested in reading the story. Nobody remembers reading this. Nobody's old enough.
And it's interesting too that when you photographed it, you left space for text.
Yes.
Because that's important too,
Yeah.
right?
And it must have come to me naturally, because this is my first assignment for the Geographic. And not only that, but I got the gutter right. You see, this is called the gutter right down there, down the middle. And it cuts perfectly. It really cuts absolutely perfectly. Nobody could have done it better, even I've been working there for 30 years. And by luck, I got the exact frame, exactly the right way. The camera never too much left or too much right. And it goes with the text that I wrote, I'm happy to say, because they could only have one reporter, one journalist to come with these people on the island, and there was somebody from the Times of London and me, and so we had what do we have, 6 weeks on this island, we actually went on the island not knowing whether we could get off and how we could get off, but fortunately with the geographic contacts we got off with the help of the U.S. Navy. But at any rate, so this is the lead photograph, and the slightly different picture is the top of that shows the island. We have to show the island. If you show the people on the ship, you have to turn around and show the island, right? Anyway, and the people going ashore. So it's all very linear. One picture follows the other. And then it shows the people on their island putting the houses back together again, where the thatch is blown off and so on and so forth. And the picture that is not in this story is that picture of the young girl. And you say, well, why didn't you put one of the pictures that was published in there? And I say to myself, well, it's my show, and I'm going to edit this story the way I want to. And I love that picture of the young girl because she's, my view. What do you think? Somebody tell me, what do you think she's thinking of? I think she's thinking of green eggs and ham, but no. What's she thinking of? What do you think she's thinking of?
She's happy to be home. Happy to be home.
I think she's happy to be home, and I think she's also wondering what her life in London would have been like. What do you think? What do you think?
I think she's reflecting on what happened.
Yeah. It's
marveling in the fact that she's maybe still alive.
And that picture came sort of toward the end of my stay there, as I remember, when I'd gotten, they'd gotten used to me and I'd gotten used to them, and I got some sense of who they were.
What language did they speak?
English and a sort of South African patois as well. Because in the end, I don't know where the women came from. They just sort of showed up that there was there ended up being, the good thing about there, you get canned lobster tails that come from just under the Korea. They have a canning plant in Tristan. It's still a going operation. People live there, and they carry on. The society carries on. There's the flat area is the only flat area. There's not a place big enough to put an airplane down, and besides, you'd have to have a multi-engine airplane because it really is right in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. So the only way that we were able to get off the island was to come in. The Navy came in with a big command ship, and they had a helicopter on board. So they flew off, the helicopter that flew off the ship, came to the island, landed, picked up me and the other reporter. But moving on to one of the other stories, let me ask you if there are some questions on it, and that way I can take a breath of air for a minute. Somebody think of a story or a question.
Do you, I'm behind you, let me, do you, the photographs are striking and it's a story of humanity, but do you take photographs of joyful moments?
Sure.
Okay.
I hope, yes, let me see if I can find one that's joyful.
Yeah,
Well, not so much to this.
they're very somber and certainly a reflection on the state of humanity and all the rest, but...
Well, I'm sorry to say, you're right.
Sorry.
I think the happiest moment is, the happiest picture is the picture of the nun. The last story that I did that was published in the magazine. And that is 1992. I was going down the Volga River in a sailboat, and we stopped at a town, found ourselves talking to the Mother Superior and of this nunnery, and off to the side was her young aide, and I turned, and I just in an instant saw the look on her face, and I just swung my camera from photograph this very imposing Mother Superior to just over this way, go click like that. I got one frame of this sort of pensive but beautiful expression on her face, I think. Pensive, but how would you describe it? Anyone want to describe it? Anybody have a viewpoint of what it looks like?
She's like lost in thought. It's not,
Yeah,
she's not concerned, she's not thinking of anything specific, she's just
I think she's just
pleasant, happy.
Anyway,
Yeah.
it's a picture we ended up using. May I have that one, that magazine too, and I'll show you. Let me see what the caption says.
So what about the photo of the two children? That's a happy.
I'll tell you, that's a happy one, I think. Is that a happy enough one?
They look happy.
Well, she's not happy, but this is, I think I've captured the quality of love. And I think capturing the quality of love is a pretty, wonderful, ephemeral thing. It's the caption writer. I take caption notes, but we have caption writers for all the stories. And she says, faith blooms anew at the Tolga convent, where a young nun embodies the rejuvenated Russian Orthodox Church, etc., etc. So that's the caption for that. But there is a kind of otherworldliness to that picture, I think. I hope anyway. You can get a sense. And the picture that, here's David. Everybody meet my son, David Blair. He just come from playing tennis.
And the grandson is hiding somewhere.
The grandson is
Hi,
somewhere.
Jackson. Where's Jackson?
And somewhere.
He's hiding. I saw him right there.
All right, so anyway, and grandson is here too. But he will appear, I hope. So, there he is. Hey, Jackson makes his entrance. Hello, Jackson. How was the tennis, David?
Very good.
Very good. Did you actually play a game?
We did our thing, but go ahead. I'm sure they don't hear about my tennis.
All right. So anyhow, so yeah, this last picture of the two, the brother and sister, is one of those moments when it all comes together. It could be a family photograph. It would be wonderful if it was David and Jackson in that picture, right? But it happened to be in Russia. I was on assignment. It's representative of the Russian people, and it says something, I think, very strongly about what love is all about, which is the concern that he has for his sister. What their concern is, I haven't a clue. They spoke Russian, I don't speak Russian, and they were having a private conversation anyway, so I wouldn't listen. But it all just worked. And when I showed this picture in the office of the National Geographic to the editor, I've got a light box here that he and I are looking at, and he sees this picture, and behind us is the whole senior staff. And he looked at this picture, it came up on the screen, and he went, "That's a good one. That's a good one." And he stood up and he shook my hand. The whole rest of the staff stood up so they could see the picture more closely. And it was a really nice thing to have happen, as you might imagine. Yes, ma'am.
So you ended your career with
Yes.
National Geographic, but that was a while ago. You know, just put
That
the
was-
camera down and quit.
That was 25 years ago. No, I don't quit, and I'm still shooting. And on the 5th of July, I think I can say, I have a show opening at the Edgewater Gallery of the latest thing I've been photographing, which you can imagine. If I were to ask people, what do you think I've been photographing? We'd be here all night, so I'll tell you. I've been photographing clouds. We have a lot of clouds in Vermont. In Barbados, they have a lot of clouds, but they're really interesting clouds. So I'm taking a lesson from Kirsten, looking at something more ethereal and more personal, and I hope you like the pictures there too. I hope so.
Jim?
Yeah.
I bet you had an editor at National Geographic, I'm sure, but I understand there was one photographic editor who had a sign or a plaque at the side of his door as you came in, and it said, "Wipe your knees."
That was our boss. That was Robert E. Gilka. There was a sign. We had the sweetest, toughest man for the director of photography that you ever saw. But he was running a corral of like about 100 photographers. So he didn't have too much time, right? And he didn't have time for anybody coming in and crying about this, that, or the other thing. And so if you wanted to cry, you went to church. But sometimes after you went to church, after you saw Mr. Gilpin. But yeah, no, it was true. But nobody, of course, came in on their knees. No, it wasn't tough.
Just checking.
Yeah. There's a lot of stories about Bob Gilka and the photography. Thank you. The whole photographic community is always interested in a new Bob Gilka story. Bob Gilka lived to be 95 years old, and was a wonderful, wonderful human being. And he had one important rule, and that rule was, if anybody has a problem with my photographers, they come see me. And they don't go to the photographer. They come to the photographer. I'll go to the photographer. And if he came to you, I mean, if he called you into his office, you know, it was something that you want to be sure that you were on steady ground and you had a good explanation for whatever might have transpired. So we had at the Geographic, we had we called them the golden years, and they were golden because we were able to shoot until the story was completed, until the pictures were in to the satisfaction of both the photographer, the picture editor, the senior picture editors, in other words, the picture editor's boss, and Bob Gilka, and even then, sometimes the director, the editor of the magazine would send you back out to shoot something, and to try to get one last thing. I did a story on Haiti, and before I left, the editor said to me, "You know, I understand you can see the border between Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Get it?" So I got it. I mean, you're not here, but the Haitian pictures are over here, and the top picture of the denuded landscape, absolutely denuded. There's no tree except down in the bottom of the valleys. And on any of those mountains, there's not a single tree left that's green. They're all dried up, blown away, because the land has been just destroyed one branch at a time. That's why the second picture down below is useful and effective. And there is indeed, and Al Gore used the picture in his book. What's the name of the book? The question of
An Inconvenient Truth.
An Inconvenient Truth. Thank you. And it shows Dominican Republic, green forest, Haiti, brown trees, and the line goes right down a river. And I shot it from flying over it in a Cessna 172. So. Are we doing on time? We've got 10 more minutes. More questions, anybody?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
The truth in the cover, the picture of the guy.
Oh, yeah.
What's the story?
Yeah. There's a
That
picture.
just made me laugh and laugh.
Yeah, good.
Having seen the training.
Help me get the book. We got it. Thank you. The picture of me in my younger days. You can look at this book, by the way. Be pleased to have you look at my book, and it's written by the historian of the National Geographic, Mark Jenkins, and you'll see this a little later than this, and I'm sorry to say, I'm happy to say I was the picture editor, because I picked the pictures. I got to fly in 1962. I got to fly in one of the Blue Angel airplanes. That's Mach 1. So, like here, for example, here the pictures. Yeah, you want to? Those are the two pictures from Tristan da Cunha. The same photograph. Let's see. You find it in London. And the most important days of my life was August 28, 1963, when Martin Luther King gave his speech. I have a dream in front of the Lincoln Memorial. Just pass. Go and take that one around so that everybody can see it. The college has a copy, a print, and I'm very happy that they do. And they get it out every February. David, where are you? Now, this is you when you were little.
Do you want everybody to see that?
Is it Matthew and David?
Is that the covers of the Geographic? No, that's
and it's
Parenting today.
when we were in London when the twins were born, and I'm getting to your picture, and we were in London when the twins were born, and I got this report from the the picture editor, who said, shipment 1, frames 1 and 2, terrific, congratulations, all best, Bill Carrot. And he ended up being the director, the editor of the magazine. Bill Garrett said, and he sent it off as an official National Geographic cable. Shipment 1, frames 1 and 2. Terrific, congratulations both. And I love it dearly. So
Good thing they didn't name you Frame 1.
so yeah, we could have named you Frame 1 and 2. Yeah. So I'm assigned to go down to the Queen's birthday parade, and the picture on the left is a picture that was the cover of a book about Great Britain, but it's the one I was looking for, and it's graphic, dramatic, and strong. And the picture that you're talking about is this one here, where you can see the guardsmen fainted, and they're trained to faint at attention. And, and I don't know what happened to his face, but he was scooped up in about 30 seconds. And I swiveled my 600mm lens around, like this, went click, and it said, and then I bracketed the exposure because it was on Kodachrome, and I hoped I got it, and I did get it. It's sharp as a tack, and it does remind people of toy soldiers, because they look like toy soldiers. But this poor guy, I'm sure, spent probably a couple of days in the hospital getting his nose fixed, if nothing else.
Jim, is the story correct that the Queen, if this happened, just stepped over the body?
I have no idea.
I didn't know that.
She was on a horse anyway, so I think she would go right on. Yeah, I mean, they believe in the stiff. You believe in the stiff upper lip, right?
Yeah, you
that's about stiff. Anyway, he's got a very stiff upper lip right now. No, and I'm glad it draws that kind of moment. That moment draws that emotion because that's what I'm trying to do, is to get a reaction to my photographs. Does anybody see anything up here on the wall that they want to talk about?
You never talked about the documentation of the national parks.
Yeah, that's yes. This is all. This is a book we did, and the book is there for you to look at, called Our Threatened Inheritance. I got kind of a reputation after 1970, where I photographed these 4 pictures here, these 3 pictures here, of environmental pollution around the country. I got a reputation for being interested in the environment, and so in '84, Mr. Reagan decided that it would be nice to sell off and retire the national debt by selling off the federal estate and the lands that we all own. He had people supporting him, Congress and in the country, and the whole National Geographic Research Committee, and the executives and the directors and the people who looked after us said, that's not a good idea. And they said to the editor of the book division, do a book about how bad an idea this is. And that's why it's called Our Threatened Inheritance. And it starts off, if I can have the book for a minute, it starts off with the writer saying, quoting a young lady, and this is not usual National Geographic language, I don't think, anyway. But I want to give a word of praise to my colleagues, the writers, the picture editors, the researchers, the people who made these pictures live on these pages. So this is a quote from the writer. Listen to this. Terry Martin sat at her kitchen table, coffee cup cradled in her hands. remembering her childhood in California and the day she invented guerrilla warfare. How about that? That's not too shabby for a start. If you're interested? All right. She was 7 years old. It's funny, she says, this is the quote. I want to go back to being a child and playing in the orchards around my house. The orchards were my frontier, a wonderful place to play. There were rabbits and deer there, and the kind of imaginary adventures kids have. And the quote goes on, I can still remember the shock of one day finding wooden stakes driven into the ground with little orange ribbons tied to them. I knew without being told what it meant. It meant that they were going to come in and cut the trees down and clear the land and build more houses. Even at that age, I remember thinking, they can't do this. They can't take away the orchards. Where will the rabbits go? Where will the deer go? Where will I play? So I pulled up all the stakes and threw them over the fence. That's the Read it for yourself.
What administration wanted to sell off the land?
The Reagan administration in 1984. And they did a pretty good job of it. And it's in the Republican, I'm sorry to say, in the Republican National, Constitution, if you will, that the environment is to be used and developed. And
Not all Republicans,
I'm sorry to say that, because I wish it were not true.
Jim, not all Republicans.
Not all Republicans,
Good.
but a sizable number of Republicans.
There's one that doesn't rule.
No, I'm sorry to say, it is a litmus test for the political direction. But anyway, I go astray here.
Keep going.
But it's, all around the world, there's a story to be told. And if you all have the time, I certainly would appreciate it if you would read the text here and the text in the other room. Richard Saunders, who gave me the opportunity to have this show, his text right next to my photograph, which was taken by my lovely wife, Elise. And the coverages that I did were all in aid of trying to make pictures that were made the world more understandable and the places more understandable. We might go to war over Iran here shortly. Look at these pictures. That's Iran from my point of view. The history, the religion, and the depth of feeling that this man has. A distinguished community, people who live there. One cannot speak for their current administrative controlling group because I don't know anything about them except that they seem pretty terrible. But the history of Persia is one that's very important, and if you want to know, you think of Iran as a small country in the Middle East. It's not. It's not. As I explained to the editor when I got back, and we showed the pictures, it goes from Boston in the east to Chicago in the west, from Miami in the east, all the way to New Orleans. It's fully a third the size of the United States. It is a gigantic country, and it is very powerful in the Middle East. I'm about out of time. I'm exactly out of time, but I will be happy to stay here for as long as anybody wants to remain.